CardGamesTV1 Podcast. Competitive players taking or stealing from casual players. Now, I'm not saying stealing, like stealing, property or anything like that per se, but or even stealing per se is just the idea of like. I noticed that a lot of times, a lot of the competitive players, they tend to use some spice that they more likely obtained or saw or witnessed or experienced or whatnot from casual play more than obviously from the competitive scene. And so many things to say, but a lot of times I noticed that not a lot of the competitive players tend to give credit where credit is due to using certain ideas that they got from casual players or that they saw online, because most people like to think that that net decking is okay, whatnot, right? That there's something wrong with it. And the thing is, for me, is like the act of net decking is not wrong, right? If you see information and you like the information, there's nothing wrong with that. And if you want to use the information, nothing wrong with that. It is the fact that you don't give credit where the information came from. You'll see a really great idea, and then you'll use it, which is fine if you use it. The thing is that you won't admit that you got it from somewhere else. You act like it was your idea. That's when it becomes a problem. When you see a really good idea, a really good strategy, you copy it, and then you try to take claim for it. You try to take credit for it. That is when net decking is a problem, right? Well, one of the issues. Then there's the other issue where just because you copied a strategy off of somebody or a deck off of somebody ain't going to give you the same results as the person who created the deck, right? You do not become an exact copy of the person you copied from. So don't expect similar results, because some people like to think that net decking does give them that if they copy off of somebody, they'll get the same results, which is why a lot of the decks that do get net decked typically are decks that won or did good at an event, and then people just immediately want to copy the deck. But there's no guarantee you're going to get the same results as whoever played the deck. Because for me, and I always will believe this, is that the true outcome of a match, a game, right? The most important thing when it comes to card games is the player. It's never going to be the cards themselves. It'll be very rare for the cards to be more important than a player, right? So that's why copying a deck doesn't mean you'll be exactly the same as whoever's deck you copied. Because you're just copying the deck, you're not copying the player. Now, if you actually play test with a player, you listen to the player, let's say the player gives you some insight on what they do, like decision-wise, mulligan-wise, that kind of stuff. Play-by-play and stuff like that. Unless you get a lot of specific information from the player themselves, the likelihood of you playing the deck the way they would play it is very slim. You gotta learn from them how to play the deck in order to actually, play the deck the way they play. Other than that, you just have the deck and that's it. It's like buying a Lamborghini. Doesn't mean you're gonna be an expert Lamborghini driver. You know what I mean? You might know how to drive like a car in general, so you might be able to do okay driving a Lamborghini, but you're not gonna have the same experience level as somebody who, professionally drives a Lamborghini or something like that, right? So that's the thing. One does not equal the other, is what I'm saying. Some people like to think just because it kind of works in video games, the whole pay to win, that they could do that in card games, even though card games still have a level of randomness. We try to reduce it competitively, right? As competitive players, we try to reduce the randomness, but we still, randomness is still a factor. So there's no guarantee that you can copy a deck and get the same results, as someone else with that deck. You still got to deal with randomness, and the possibility of you drawing bad is a possibility. The fact that there's even a possibility you draw a good hand, but you play it wrong. That's another possibility. Because like I said, you're not that player who built the deck, so you wouldn't know, 100% how to play the deck. And then it's just the fact that different types of people have different ways of thinking, different ways of doing things. So, because imagine a aggro deck that was played by somebody, but later on you find out that that person is more of a control player. So when they play the deck, they kind of play it a little bit more like a control player, even though the deck is designed to be more of an aggro deck. And that small detail, that little specific detail right there, is the reason why they're more successful with the deck than you would be. Because they're a control player playing an aggro deck, while you're an aggro player playing an aggro deck, more likely. Because if you like an aggro deck, if you're an aggro player, you're going to like aggro decks, so you're going to more likely net deck an aggro deck, obviously, right? But you don't have the mindset of like, oh, you know what? Maybe the person who played this deck wasn't really an aggro player. Maybe this was just the one time they played an aggro deck, and they typically, play control decks or something. So they were playing something different. They were playing something out of their comfort zone, and that right there was the magic sauce, right? The secret sauce to their success. But you don't know that. That's the thing. You don't know that. You don't get that information by net decking. And many, many things. I can go on and on about why net decking is not good, and it's more so not good for the player themselves, especially if you want to consider yourself a good player or a competitive player. Building your own decks is the better route. But hey, to each their own. Whatever works, right? I've said this before. Even the best players lose. So thinking you're net decking off the best players, your guaranteed victory is false, because even the best players lose. So, and they can lose to even the worst players. It's not like they have to lose to other best players. They could lose to bad players. So let's not assume things, right? So that's why I always say the best deck for you as a player is whatever deck you build. It's never going to be somebody else's deck that will be the best deck for you. It will always be the deck you build for yourself that will be the best deck for you. But anyway, it's something that I noticed that a lot of times, I'll see something, like a common strategy that's typically used, by casual players, and then suddenly at some point I'll see it be used, in a tournament or something. It's like, oh, I recognize that strategy. I've seen that many times before, being played casually, and now it's being played competitive, right? A lot of the best ideas, a lot of the best spice tends to come from casual players, rogue players, whatever you want to call them, right? And that's another thing, especially in Yu-Gi-Oh! They always try to downplay rogue players as if rogue players are bad players, and rogue doesn't do good in tournaments, when it's false. Rogue decks tend to top a lot, not always win the event, obviously, because it depends on matchups and stuff like that a lot of the times, and definitely depends on the player. But rogue decks do tend to top a lot, and after a while, a lot of the rogue decks tend to become meta decks, especially if the quote-unquote best deck in the format gets hit, right, gets banned, gets a couple of the cards banned or restricted. Then suddenly those players that played those decks gotta find something else to play, and what they usually default to some rogue decks that that they saw at these events or at their locals, and try something different. So then they'll try the rogue decks and try to make the rogue decks, in their eyes, competitive, but logically they always was competitive. Even a casual deck played properly is competitive. But anyway, even a starter deck is competitive if you play it properly, because whether you play the game casually or competitively, the game is still the same. The rules are the same. There's no difference between the rules of playing casually versus playing competitively. You're still playing the same game. The rules are the same. The outcomes are usually the same. It's like you gotta deal 8 damage to win. It ain't that complicated. It's not rocket science. And it's definitely there's very little difference between competitive and casual. The only difference that I could point out would be the competitive players should be playing a little bit faster because they do have time they have to deal with. That's like one of the few small differences between competitive and casual. Is casual, you have almost infinite time. You could take a while. You could take your time playing casually, right? So you could take an hour or two to play one game or something like that. I mean, that's ridiculous, but you get the idea. It's like you could play a very slow game casually, but competitively you should be playing faster because you only have but so much time. And not only that, you also want to play cards that are easy to play, right? That don't require a lot of setup, a lot of effort. When you play them, they actually do something, as opposed to you play them and then your opponent has an out to it, or you play it and it doesn't even do much because it's not that strong or whatever. Like you played casually, you could play your favorite cards because you like the character more than what the card actually does. So that's a slight difference between casual and competitive. Competitive should definitely focus more on cards that have really good effects, and try to at least build a deck that can guarantee you could play the card and win with it, or B, find something that's easier to play, cheaper to play, energy wise, and then go that route. Like I found this 8-drop Gogeta that I could play for 2 energy. It's a 30k double strike dual attack. Like just that alone sounds great. It has other abilities, of course, but just that alone, 30k double strike dual attack for 2 energy. But obviously that means because I'm evolving it on top of a 5-drop, right? I'm paying 2 to put it on top of 5-drop. The 5-drop costs 1 energy to play. So the 5-drop costs 1 energy to play, but I have to meet the condition. The condition is to get a Vegeta and a Goku in the drop that are both blue and both have energy cost of 1, and then bottom deck them in order to play this 5-drop Gogeta for 1 energy. But that's not impossible. I could just combo the Goku and Vegeta and guarantee they're in the drop, right? Then pay 1 energy and drop this 5-drop. Then pay 2 blue to put the 8 on top of the 5, and now I have a 30k double strike thing that's attack twice. Which also has the ability to, just by playing the 8-drop, I can bounce 2 of my opponent's battle cards back to their hand. So that's potential getting rid of 2 potential blockers. So I can, swing 30k double strike twice. So, that's good. And I like the character. So I like the character, Gogeta fan. I like the character. Plus, this is, a really good energy efficient strategy. So, I'm going to use it. And I already bought the cards for that strategy. It cost me like $38 to get all 16 cards, because I had to get the Goku and the Vegeta 1-drops, and then the 5-drop and the 8-drop Gogetas. So the Goku and the Vegeta 1-drops, I had to get them just so I can have that strategy. And it's a really nice one. You can use it with any blue leader. Yeah, because in order to play the 5-drop for 1 energy, the leader has to be mono blue. So, not too hard. I do use a lot of blue leaders, so it's not too hard to play it. Obviously, you can play with Soul Striker. That's a deck I'm working on. A certain build, Soul Striker build for it, because it definitely has some synergy with that. Because I could definitely turn to the Gogeta. So turn 2 Gogeta with Soul Striker obviously has some value. So I'll definitely be trying that out. What else? What was I talking about? Oh yeah. So I wouldn't be too surprised that after I post my deck profiles of me using this 8-drop Gogeta, that it starts becoming something that gets played competitively. I mean, besides me using it competitively, right? But would it be too surprising that it starts getting used? First off, typically would be used casually, but then might trickle up into competitive scene, which is what I'm trying to point out. A lot of times that tends to happen. There's something that I know is typically played among casual players at some point does end up in the competitive scene. But the irony is that's when it becomes more popular, when a competitive player plays it. But the irony is the competitive player gets the credit for the cards, right, for the strategy, instead of the casual players, the ones who originally, was already using the idea already. So that's one of the issues that you tend to see between competitive and casual is the glorification of competitive players, giving competitive players way too much credit, even so much so that if I put out, because I get this a lot, I'll put out some ideas. I'm like, oh, this is a cool strategy, this, that, and third, or I'll have a critique, right? I'll point out that, hey, man, competitive players, I tend to notice they tend to play a little bit slower. They don't deal as much damage as they could with certain hands. Maybe they want to, deal more damage and try playing the game a little bit differently. And then, the immediate response I get from some people would be like, well, how many tops do you have? Blah, blah, blah. As if, topping tournaments is the only qualification for being good at the game. Like, I'm not allowed to critique, or I'm not allowed to have any input when it comes to playing the game unless I top. And a lot of times, what's also ironic is most of the people that like to try to, flex and try to act like topping an event is super important. Some of these people don't win the event, they just top. It's like, okay, cool, you're top 32 and you came in 32nd place. Good for you, but that's not impressive. 32 is not better than 1. Being number 1, if you won the event, you have a lot of bragging rights. If you came in 32nd place, right, 16th place, 8th place, I'm not impressed. Good for you. Maybe you got some prizing from being, from that. Good for you, but it doesn't matter to me, personally anyway. I'm more impressed if you came in first place. Shit, if you came in second place, I give you some respect, because you could have been first place. So I give second place players, respect for, at least being second place, because at least you had the chance to potentially be first place. The only reason you're second place is because the first place winner beat you. So I'll respect the second place winner, but I can't respect somebody who came in 3rd, 4th, 5th, 16th, 32, but they always want to be treated like they won the event. Oh, I top, treat me special. No, you're not special. I mean, you might be mentally special, but you're not special in my eyes. It's like, come in first place on an event, or at least second place, and I give you the respect that you're clearly looking for, the clout, the accolade you're looking for. But until then, don't come to me with that bullshit of, I top events, I should be listened to. Nope. Show me that you're good at the game. Show me your ideas. Show me that you think for yourself. You're not a net decker, right? Just copying off of other people's idea and try to take credit for it. Just because you went to a tournament and did decent with the idea, now you want all the credit for it, like as if you came up with the idea, or as if, you're actually really good at the game. It's like, nah, you're mid. You're average. My grandma could do that, could net deck and do good at an event. I'm not impressed. I'm impressed if you could do what other people can't do. I'd be impressed. You build a deck from, a deck from scratch. Somebody looks at the deck and be like, oh, this deck is terrible. All right, you believe that. Then take it to an event and do good at the event. Then, I'll be impressed. I'm like, see, people doubted your abilities, but you're actually a good player. You took a deck that people thought wasn't good, and it did good. And sometimes I also have that scenario happen where I come up with a certain deck concept. I get some, slack about it. Some people hating on the idea, thinking that the idea is terrible. But then later on, see other people play it, and then they actually go to tournaments and use it. And that happens a lot to me in Yu-Gi-Oh! I've created thousands and thousands of decks in Yu-Gi-Oh! And clearly a lot of my ideas were used competitively. I don't get the credit that I deserve for it, but whatever. But then just the irony is like, damn, just a couple of weeks ago, people were saying that that deck idea I had was a bad idea. It was a bad concept. But then you see somebody, a lot of people playing it and topping, and they even go to Worlds and they're playing the deck. And I'm like, damn, somebody went to Worlds with my deck idea. Might not be the exact build, but it's using my concept and a lot of the same cards that I was using. So it's like, okay, well, I'm glad to see my idea, was valuable, even if I'm not getting credit for it. And that's the thing that, I'm trying to point out, is that tends to happen a lot, more often than you think. But there is, I gotta say something nice, right? I can't just have negativity, right? Negative stuff to say. There is the times where I do like it when I see like a profile of somebody topping and doing pretty good, and then they do give credit to other people. Like I just saw their profile, and the person was giving a lot of credit to other people. I'm like, that's what I like to see. Someone, being humble, showing, making sure other people get credit for their success instead of trying to take all the credit for themselves. Because no one's perfect. So the idea that there's a lot of people out there trying to take all the credit. Because whenever somebody, I get an idea from somebody else. Because let's say somebody else pointed something out to me, like, hey, you could use these cards instead. And it's like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. I'm gonna give credit. Because I'm pretty good at figuring things out myself, but even I can overlook certain things, certain details. Ironically, I had somebody that I played against at an event that I went to, local, that I went to, and he pointed out some cards that I should look into for my Zamasu deck to help it recycle my cards more. Which ironically, I did try to make a lot of the cards that he was recommending work. I even found some other cards that have synergy with those cards. So the thing is, it just put me in a certain path of trying to find things that can create that strategy that he was referring to. But eventually, I kind of scrapped it because some of the cards weren't that great. They were just good enough for the recovery strategy, but they individually weren't that great for just for having a deck and to use them. I would have just used them as combo power more often than not, and I typically try not to combo when I play, so them just being dedicated combo pieces, not my style. And, just feels a little bit more pointless considering the fact that I try not to combo them. So I was like, yeah, I'd rather play other stuff. I'd rather play stuff that can negate attacks. I want more, attack negators. I want more damage dealers, like more cards I can attack with. So I started like looking into other things, like, okay, let me go back to some of my old ideas and try to make some of them work and try to synergize them. So that's where I ended up, because I had an idea of like a skillless strategy I was thinking of, among other things. Because the idea is like, I know there's some cards that can put cards back in the deck, and they tend to have some synergy with skillless. That's when I found that 5-drop Gogeta, and saw that it can put 2 1-drop battle cards from your drop, one being a Goku, one being a Vegeta, to the bottom of your deck in order to play this card. I'm like, yes, that's what I'm looking for. And it's a Gogeta card. Sign me up. I'm a fan. So it's like, oh, cool, this has synergy with my Zamasu leader. And I already have a 1-drop Goku and Vegeta card, which is the Goku and Vegeta Saiyan synergy, right? That already meets this card's criteria. But it's like, well, I want to put a couple more 1-drop Goku and Vegetas just to guarantee I always have targets for it, just so I can keep the synergy. But typically I want them to at least have some type of defensive effect, like a negate. So I did find a 1-drop blue Vegeta that can negate an attack, and I found one blue Goku that's a blocker. I prefer him to be negate an attack. Hopefully, Bandai will create a 1 energy counter attack Goku so I can replace the blocker Goku. But for now, I have to use the blocker one just for the sake of the deck strategy, because I want something that has defense or has a defensive use, and the Goku being a blocker is good enough for now. So I technically have 12 1-drop negates in battle card form that are Goku and Vegeta related. So there's that. So there's 12 targets for the 5-drop Gogeta. And because I had the 5-drop Gogeta, obviously I could play the 8-drop Gogeta. I didn't know the 8-drop existed until I found out about the 5-drop. The 5-drop led me to the 8-drop, and there we go. So now, one thing leads to another. So now I'm trying out some new stuff, and I always like finding some new things to play around with, some new spice, which helps me be ahead of the game, because I'm doing stuff that other people ain't doing until they see my videos and stuff, and then they start doing it. Right? The cycle continues. But that's the thing I'm pointing out, is that I do like it. I don't put my ideas out there for them to be ignored. Obviously, I put them out there because I want people to use them. So I don't have an issue with people using my ideas and stuff. It's just the irony that I don't get as much credit as I should. And there'll be times where I hear somebody like, oh yeah, because of this person, people are using this card. It's like, yeah, because of that person, people are using that card. Even though I was already using that card for a long, long time. But okay, let's give that person credit because they used it. So that's the thing. Sometimes a lot of my ideas really get traction more when they're quote-unquote endorsed by, a quote-unquote good player, right? I'm not saying that they aren't good. I'm just saying it's like they got to be the ones to use it in order for my ideas to be good, as if me having the idea and sharing it and using it myself is not enough. And this is where it goes back to the whole, oh, well, if you top advanced, then people will respect your ideas, blah, blah, blah. It's like, but it's implying that my ideas aren't good until they're used competitively. Think about how stupid that sounds. They're not good until it's like they have to be blessed by the competitive gods or something in order for a card to be good, as if a card can't be good just because it exists, just because it actually is a good card. Think about how stupid that is. Like Tragedy Overground. I was using that for a long time. Then somebody else used it competitively, and then it started getting traction. More people started playing it. Now I know casually a lot of people were already using it because they got the idea from me, and I've talked to most of those people who, did tell me that, oh, they loved the idea and they went and tried it out themselves. So I know that I directly influenced some casual players to use the idea. But then of course it became more known, and when a competitive player started using it. So that's just the humorness of it. Some people only think something is valid if somebody that they consider valid was involved, had something to do with it. Then suddenly they want to validate it. It's like trying to say, Android 17 Turning the Tide isn't good until a competitive player uses it. Even if casual player has been using it for like a long, long time, unless a competitive player uses it, it's not a good card. It's like, what? What are you trying to say? It's one thing to say that the card's not popular in competitive play. That I can understand, because that's the proper wording. If you don't think my ideas are good enough for competitive play, that's fine. But don't say my ideas are bad as if they're bad in general. Not even casual play would be good, because that's just ignorant. Just saying something that I recommend being bad off the bat without any proof. It's like, I understand if you say competitively, it might not be a good card, might not be viable competitively, might not be consistent competitively. I can understand that. That's fair enough. That's where play testing the card, right? The cards are the ideas, and trying them out competitively is where you get to know if it is really good competitively. But to dismiss the idea just because it hasn't yet been used competitively is ignorant. Tons of cards that have competitive viability have not yet been used competitively yet, because too many people are stuck in their ways using what they're already using, so they don't even try anything different, anything new. I'm always trying new things, different things. A lot of the new things that I try are way better than the stuff that I was using before. Even though the stuff I was using before was good, it just, when you compare it to the new stuff I'm trying, the new stuff is just so much better. So much better, so much more fun. You know, sometimes they're better energy cost wise. Like, they cost less and they do more. So it's always better to always trying to improve and always trying to find better. And that's the thing, always assume that there is better out there to find. But too many people like to think that, no, there's only one good blue leader, that's Soul Striker, you know, that kind of ignorance. You know? But, oh well, can't tell people otherwise, right? Because they're going to do whatever they want, how they want. But this is one of the many things that I notice in the community, that not many people get as much credit as they deserve. Another thing I noticed is that a lot of competitive players don't have YouTube channels, right? So they're barely sharing any information with others. So it makes you wonder, like, what are they doing when they're not making videos, right? When they're not sharing ideas and stuff like that. Now, I understand, as a competitive player, I get you want to keep your spices a secret and whatnot. Fair enough, right? Until after you get to go use the spice at an event, I understand you want to keep it a secret, right? That's fair. But I doubt you only have one or two, spice. You probably have other spice that are decent, right? They're good spice, but they're not like something you would use, competitively anyway. But you would use them because they're decent cards. At least share those, right? Share your secondary spice, right? Your honorable mention spice with the community. But at the same time, I can understand the idea of, like, oh, I don't want to put spice out there because then people will use it. And if they use it, that makes their decks, obviously better. And if their decks are better, then that makes it harder for me to beat them, right? That creates more competition, and I rather have the advantage. I want to win more because my opponents don't have good spices in their deck, right? They don't have good strategies. They have the bare minimum for their archetype, or the bare minimum for their deck, or the color they're playing. I don't want them to know that there's some good spice cards, right, that they could add to their deck that will drastically change the power dynamic of their deck versus their matchups, right? Like, you don't want to tell your like, if you play hand control, you don't want to tell everybody, hey, a really good spice for y'all deck against hand control is these specific cards. They'll be really good against hand control. You don't want to do that, because then if everybody uses that, then your hand control deck is useless, right? Because everybody will have that spice that helps them combat hand control. So I get it. But what I'm trying to say is, it would be nice that after the fact, after you already got to take advantage of the spice advantage, as what, if you want to call it that, spice advantage, right? Then afterwards, share some spice. I'm just saying, share some old spice. Yeah, there you go. I said it, right? Pun intended, right? Share some old spice. I'm not saying share your current spice, but share some old spice, right? Because that's your way of giving back to the community. But that's something I see a lot. That a lot of competitive players don't give back to community as much. The most they'll do is like, yeah, I won a tournament. Here's my deck list. Net deck it and leave it at that. They don't try to show you that there was other ideas, other options. They definitely don't show you the process in which led them to the current build they're playing, and show you like some old builds, like, this is what I was trying before. It was okay, but ultimately I ended up with this build because I prefer this strategy, this route. So it's very rare for anyone to share some old ideas for a deck. They always just care more about showing off the final result, like, here's the final version of this deck. They don't tend to show you the process. They don't try to show you other builds, other strategies. Because whenever I upgrade a deck and make a deck better that I play, I do share it. A lot of times I do share it before I use it, and vice versa. It depends, right? But it's like I don't, because for me anyway, I don't care too much about sharing. A lot of my ideas are so unique anyway that even if I post my ideas, right, my exact deck list that I'm gonna take to a tournament and post it online, right, I could post it a month before the event, right. People still are gonna be caught off guard anyway. They're still gonna be surprised, right? That's the funny thing. My ideas tend to be, very creative. That even if they knew about it, even if they remembered, my list, it won't matter too much. Knowing what's in my deck is not going to give you too much insight on how I played the deck anyway. That's another thing, right? For me, it's like I noticed that I always want to assume that if people look at my deck list, they will understand how the deck works. Well, y'all proved me wrong. Time and time again. Many of y'all have proved me wrong. Y'all can't see the strength and the power and the capabilities and the synergy that a lot of my decks have, which is unfortunate because my decks have a lot of synergy, a lot of intricacies, as they say. I'll literally have decks that have very little combo power, and people will complain about it because they don't see the strength. They don't see how the deck is meant to be played. They just focus on how they play, and they're like, "Oh, I'm used to having a whole bunch of combo power. I'm not used to having a deck full of cards that don't have combo power. Man, this deck has too many unisons. I don't play a lot of unisons. Man." And they always get into that, always thinking that their way is the only way and that their way is the right way. I don't claim that my way is the right way. I just claim that my way is the way. It's one way you can play the game, and it works for me, so it should work for others. I've had some people, tell me that they, tried out my decks and played my decks, and, they enjoy it. It's fun. I always do like hearing that people enjoy playing my decks, and I'm glad you're able to have fun with the decks, enjoy them, enjoy playing them, and, make sure y'all winning, right? Make sure y'all make the right line of play, get them W's, all that good stuff. I don't ask for too much. I definitely do my best to give credit where credit is due. I definitely like ideas, I don't mind people sharing, spice or tech cards or, maybe card suggestions. That reminded me that one time when somebody asked me about why I don't use, what was it? It was Foo something. I don't think it wasn't Foo Banisher. Oh, Shrouded in Mystery, right? Is this Shrouded in Mystery? Yeah. It's Foo Shrouded in Mystery. Yeah, Shroud. Foo Shrouded in Mystery. Not Foo, Mission Accomplished. It's Foo Shrouded in Mystery. Why I don't use it. I had to double check the card. Because I do own the card, I just don't use it. But I had to go check online the image of the card just so I can see the effects and be like, and just to see what it does. And I'm like, oh, okay, that card. Yeah, it costs 10 energy, if I'm right, in order to play it. Something like that, right? If I'm right, it costs 10 to play it. Let me look it up real quick, because I think I'm saying it wrong. I just know that it has a hefty cost. It probably costs 6 to play. Who's Shrouded in Mystery? He's a 10 drop, so that's the thing. I think it costs 6 to play him. Right? I think that's what it was. So, yeah, according to the image, it is 6 to play him. So, I get it. So he's overwhelmed 10, so I need 10 cards in a drop, and I gotta pay 6 to play him. So he's a 6 cost. Depending on what deck I'm playing, most most games end on turn 4, turn 5, so it'd be, unless I'm stalling hard as F, turn 6. Now, it's not impossible. I mean, I could do it, because all I have to do is like turn 5, play like the 5-drop Super Saiyan 4 Goku, Protector of the Earth Unison, get that auto off, trigger his -2 ability, right? Just to kind of guarantee I get an extra turn, or do some type of topo play, Oceanus play potentially, or just some like floodgate negate type thing, just a way to guarantee I get to turn 6, right? Pretty much do whatever I normally would do, for the Sin Shenron leader 6 energy play, right? So whatever I can do to get to turn 6, I'll get to turn 6. But I also have to make sure I have 10 cards in my drop, so I gotta play a strategy that guarantees that. Technically, I could play this, and it wouldn't be a bad card to play this card in my Zamasu deck. So it wouldn't be a bad idea to try to play my Zamasu deck, because I have a higher chance of getting to turn 6 with to turn 6 to play this card and to have the 10 cards for it. I could also play this in a like a Wish Leader deck or something, because I can guarantee the 7 Dragon Balls, right? So that's one way. You use the Dragon Balls as part of the cost to play this, and then trigger his effect off, and he'll be a 30k double strike. That when you play this card using Overwhelm, your opponent can't activate skills on cards other than their leader card until the beginning of their next turn. Right? So they can't activate skills. Now I don't know the ruling. I'm just going to go with what this card says. I'm assuming this could also prevent negates. I'm assuming. Definitely should be able to prevent blockers. That I know for sure. It could prevent blockers from being used. I don't know if this could prevent negates from negating his attack. This should be able to definitely stop Topo and Oceanus's autos, or their effects. I don't know if it'll stop the negate and their effects, so it just depends. But it's like, okay, Food Shot and Mystery, decent card. It has some potential, especially if it can prevent negates and stuff like that, then it's understandable. It definitely should be able to prevent super combos, arrival plays, like at least the effects of arrival plays or something like that, or at least prevent arrival plays in the first place, but opponents can't activate skills on cards other than their leader. So this definitely does sound like it does, it's a really good finisher, because it definitely stops a lot, so there's a high chance of you winning with this card. So I see the potential, and I do own the card. It just, I just use many other things, there's other stuff I'd rather play that I have a little bit more fun with, but I see the potential. There's nothing, I have nothing against this card. I do consider myself looking like the real life version of Fu, especially my hair is getting whiter and whiter. So I definitely like the character Fu, which is why I have most of his cards. But I just don't play it. Not that I'm against the card, I just don't really play it. But I would consider the idea of playing it. Gotta double check. So I don't know if he either got banned, because I know a lot of people wanted him banned. I don't know if he did get banned or not. So I gotta double check that. If he did get banned, well, that's another reason why I'm not playing the card, because it got banned, right? But if he didn't get banned, then I might want to try to incorporate him in a couple of decks here and there, just for the sake of him being a good card to use. But the point is that the person pointed out the card, and they were like, is it because I think the card is bad or something? It's like, not necessarily. When you look at the card, it does look good. The thing is just that the way I play, having the 6 energy and having 10 cards in his drop, is a lot. It's a lot. Not impossible to get to those numbers, but it is a lot. And it's like, me personally, I'm always looking for stuff that are cheaper. The less I pay to play something, right? Free is always awesome, right? The less I pay to play something, the better. So I prefer to play stuff with a very low cost. That's one of the things that's funny. It reminds me, for a long time, I was never interested in anything that costs more than 4. The maximum of any card that I have would be 4. It would be very rare for me to have a 5-drop card, right? A 5-cost card, unless it did something like really epic. But like 4 was, you know, the normal standard. Like, so it's always 4 drops, 3, 2, and 1s, right? I always try to avoid 5 drops. But if I did play a 5-drop, it would obviously, you know, be a tech. I wouldn't have a lot of 5 drops, but that has changed over the years. There's a lot of high cost cards that I do like to play. They're really good, even though they're, you know, they're costly. They cost a lot, but what they do is worth it. It's worth that extra cost. But it's just something I want to point out, because if this was a 4 energy Overrealm 10, then I wouldn't be surprising for me to, you know, try it out. I would just have to, you know, really put it in a deck that can easily get 10 cards in a drop, and then for 4 energy, play it. Yeah, I would definitely try to play it, because I would try to use that as a turn 4 finisher. But because it's 6 energy, the likelihood of me getting to turn 6, like if I'm paying 6 energy, right, I'd rather play something that burns my opponent for game if I'm getting to turn 6, or just a 6 energy in general, then, you know, I'd rather play something that burns as opposed to something that, you know, I still have to attack in order to try to go for game. Because as far as I know, yeah, your opponent can still combo, so it's not like they can't combo. It's not like this has the added ability that your opponent can't out combo this card's attack. So that is still an option for them. So it's a good card. But I'd rather play something like Mirror Creator Absorb instead. If I'm going to play an Overrealm, I'd rather play that, because he only costs 1 to play, and you just need a minimum of 4 cards. So those types of criterias, you know, those conditions are just easier for me to meet, and I prefer, you know, simpler conditions. Plus the fact that it can easily get stronger than 30k, and all I have to do is give it double strike, which is not too difficult since I do play Champas and Supreme Kai a lot. So that's just my preference. So I just play what, you know, works best for me. Not saying Food Shrouded in Mystery is bad or anything like that. And if people, you know, casually or competitively like to use the card, hey, fine, to each their own. I just don't use it, even though I do own the card. But I definitely would like to use the Food Banisher more often. You know, the triple attacker. I do own that. I would like to use that a little bit more, so I'll try to remember it. It's just that some cards, even though I like them, I tend to forget to try them out. I try to fit them in decks and try to use them, because I'm so busy always trying new things, and I'm always, you know, there's some cards that I'm just so used to playing that, you know, it's hard for me to want to stop playing them because they're that good. They're so good that they become like staples. So sometimes it's hard to get rid of some staples that I'm so used to playing just to try out some new stuff. So there's that. Just a little insight to my mind of why I do or don't play certain cards or strategies. Because I just do what I do, whatever works best for me, whatever I'm comfortable with. You know, I've seen some pretty good, you know, strategies, concepts from other people, you know, because I do watch YouTube videos, and, you know, a lot of times I'm like, that's great and all, but it's not really my cup of tea. You know, it's like I'd rather either find a easier way to do that same thing, or just don't do it at all. Just do something different. So there'll be times where, like, I'll see something that it's a decent strategy, but then, you know, it's a good strategy, but for me, I'm like, not my thing. I don't play that way, so then I'm not going to try to do it, right? I'm not going to try to play the way someone else plays, you know, if it's not my thing. Not saying I'm not open to different ways of doing things. I'm just saying that, you know, if it's not my thing, it's not my thing. Okay, Dimensional Banisher Food. That's the triple attacker, right? Man, this is taking long to load. Oh, okay. No, this is a different one. Dimensional Banisher Fu. He's double strike. Overrun 5 for 1 energy, 20k. Let's send him to the warp. He has some potential. Alright, but the triple attack, Banisher Fu is the one I'm thinking of. Let's see. I don't think I see the card here. Let's see if I put Fu and then put Banisher. Yeah, there he is. Yeah, there's Banisher. That is Dark Banisher. Okay, so Fu the Dark Banisher. That's what I'm thinking of. 25k, triple attack overwhelm, 8, 4 energy. So that's the one I would rather go. And notice that it costs 4 to play. So instead of costing 6 like Fu Shrouded, it costs 4, and it costs 2 cards less to overwhelm. But I get 3 attacks, right? So that can help me out if my opponent tries to combo. The other thing, it does have a permit. Your opponent can't activate skills unless they choose 1 card in their hand and send it to their warp. So it's similar to Fu Shrouded, but my opponent has the ability to get their effects. So even though Shrouded is comparatively a bit stronger in the effect aspect, it costs more, and I rather have the triple attack because at least I have the potential of potentially doing 3 damage, or at least 2 damage. If they negate my first attack, at least I have 2 more attacks to try to go for game, and I could always just give them, double strike. So at least I have 3 potential opportunities to try to finish my opponent off with a double strike chomp up play. So I prefer Fu the Dark Banisher. So that's just me. Definitely would like to, use him more. He definitely would be decent in Hatchiak. I could definitely use him in Hatchiak, so I definitely would try to fit him into my Hatchiak deck. Obviously, that's one of the decks I would definitely like to use it in, would be Hatchiak, because it is an 8-drop that can attack 3 times, so that's very useful. Let's see. Well, that'll be the end of the podcast. I'm talking too much.